Hi, this is Melissa Ainsley. This is the third episode of the 11 Intuitions podcast. This week I have probably made this rough draft at least 14 times. It is 8:23 p.m. on a Friday night. I'm just tired of figuring out what I'm going to say. I'm just going to wing it. I'm glad that I waited until Friday night to record this because something amazing happened yesterday, and this podcast was going to be just about my dad. But my mom showed up yesterday, and I wanted to include her in this because this podcast is about forgiveness. That was something that my mom didn't find until later in life. Now she exudes it so freely. The messages that I received from my parents this week was not something that I even expected. You would think as a medium, you would definitely get messages all the time. I receive signs from my parents every single day, but messages are different. These messages came very unexpectedly. That's what this podcast is for. Today, to share what they came through as saying, because this podcast topic was too important not to share with you. I know that there are many people out there who definitely need to hear this. I know I needed to hear this. I really tried to plan and give forgiveness, and I definitely had to do that with my dad before he passed away. Well, I'm going to work very hard not to cry during this podcast, but this is a special one for me because my parents are just absolutely amazing working on the other side, and I think you're going to be able to tell that with this podcast. So it is called Forgiveness Frees You. Today's episode wasn't planned. I was going to meet my friend Melissa at McDonald's, and I told her, I said, hey, we can either meet after my student at noon, or I've got time during this time, but I do have a student. When I woke up that morning, my noon student said, hey, is it okay if we move my time until 11? And I was like, sure, but I'm not sure if your sitter can meet that time, but if she can, no problem. As you know, I didn't have a phone number because that sitter was in another country. And I said, Melissa, my friend, I guess you're going to be a sitter for my student. And she's like, okay. So this is the story of what happened that morning. So after my first student, Melissa and I had a lot to catch up on, and we were just talking about, what I've been doing, and she wanted to hear about my trip to New York a couple weeks ago, and, I told her about it and said that the reason that I was basically able to do this and able to take care of this nasty spirit that was there was because I had found forgiveness with my father before he passed away. I'll deal with that later in another podcast, but forgiveness is a hard thing, especially when people have hurt you, have hurt other people in your life. And, a lot of people have not forgiven him, even to this day. It's something that I worked very hard for, and it's something that he thanked me for before he passed. And the day before he went into his hospice bed, he asked me a question. He said, I see how hard you work doing these readings, working these cases. Why can't Spirit just tell you what happened to them? I said, Daddy, you're going to die. Why don't you go up there and you help me? Just like Mom does. He never understood the connection that I had with her. It wasn't until a few days before he was going to die where we were really able to have those conversations. He was really stubborn and didn't want to have those heart-to-heart conversations until he knew it was going to be the end. And he admitted that, he could hear the wind chimes go off in the house, and that was her. But he said he was jealous of the connection that I had with her and that I was able to talk to her. I did do a reading for him soon before he passed, the first thing that she said to him was, "It's about time, Fred." That sounds like her. He just, I guess, was scared to hear from her, maybe what she had to say. I'm not sure. But forgiveness goes a long way in life. And when you hear about what he had to say, I can understand that. And I can tell you that this man was afraid of passing away. But I can tell you that he is up there and he is helping other people who are afraid to die, helping them cross over. I can also tell you that he is changed. He is a changed man. He is doing the work that he needs to. I have recordings from different mediums stating that he has done the work, that he is a changed person. Spirit. The reading that I have today talks about what the work that you should do down here. It just was a beautiful reading. And so I want to tell you how that happened. And you're probably going, well, yes, that's what we've been waiting for. So basically, Melissa and I were talking again about, my trip. I told her about it and also about the other stuff that I've been doing, the students, how busy we've been with the business and stuff like that. And then it came time for the student to come on. And of course, the sitter didn't show up. And so I said, okay, it's your turn. And I handed her my headphones, which had been working all morning. Of course, at that time, it did not work for her. So I said, well, why don't we trade places? So we traded places. Again, still did not work for her. And the student said, it sounds like you're underwater. And so Melissa just listened, and the student said, just yes, no, or just, nod your head, because she really couldn't hear her. The student couldn't hear her. So I just, watched Melissa get the reading, and I was just on my phone playing my daily New York Times Wordle puzzles and stuff like that. I could, hear the student just talk a little bit over it. There was a lady behind me. A lot of people were having their lunch that worked there. And so then all of a sudden I heard Melissa say, well, I still don't know who this spirit is. I was like, oh no, because I really wanted her to hear from one certain spirit. I was kind of disappointed that she didn't get to. And then, a couple minutes later, she goes, okay, so do I just give the headphones back to Melissa? And she said, yeah. So I got back on with the student, and she's like, well, why is that? Why couldn't she take who this spirit was? And I was like, sometimes the reading, isn't meant for them. Maybe it's for someone else. She said, okay, well, I get that. She said, well, the spirit, really had a message for whoever it was. I hope she can figure out who it is. But they also had a message for her too. She was able to take that and understand it. I said, well, that's just wonderful. I said, you did exactly what you needed to. So I'm proud of you. And she said, well, you have a great time with your friend. I said, okay, thank you. And then we got off. Melissa said, hey, I'm going to have to go. I'm just going to use the restroom real quick. I said, okay. I started packing up and put my laptop in my backpack and everything. And then all of a sudden, Melissa comes back, literally just gets into the booth and goes, is it possible that your dad would have come through in my reading? I looked at her and I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, the headphones. He loves to play with electronics. And I'm like, and she goes, cancer. Your dad had cancer. I said, yes. And she goes, you need to listen to the reading. Your dad came through this reading. And I said, okay. I just was in shock, It still just shocks me. I said, well, thank you. So we talked about a few other things and everything. So I came home and I immediately came in and started listening to the reading. I just started crying. I really just started crying because it was my dad. It really was him. I'm going to read to you a few things that he said. The first part was for me. I'm going to try not to cry. Well, I'm going to start crying now because it's just so beautiful that he came through to her while I was sitting there watching her. My student said, I feel a male in spirit. Towards the end of his life, he was grumpy. He's saying things like, stop putting IVs in me, stop messing with me, stop turning me over and wiping me. This wasn't who he was all the time, but the sickness changed his personality. He became short and cross with people he would ordinarily be really loving to. I see frailness, brittle bones. I see hip pain, maybe a displacement or break. I also see the possibility of cancer. It was a drawn-out process, and he feels remorseful about the way it ended. And at my funeral, as soon as I was free of pain, I could be myself again. I wanted to apologize to people. I was trying to get their attention. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. I wish I had a second chance. I wish I wasn't so harsh. I wish I had taken care of more things while I was on the earth. And then he said he wanted to apologize to his caregiver. I was his caregiver. I just really cried, I really, really cried because he had a rough ending. He really did. It was very painful for him. He was grouchy, but seeing the amount of pain that he was in, I can understand that. It was a rough few weeks. We had a rough few weeks, but I know that he loved me and I loved him too, and I know that I was there for him. And to hear him say that and coming through have her tell me that, it was just really, really sweet. So then he tells Melissa a message for her. He wanted her to know this. So do the hard work now. It's not any easier on the other side. This isn't about the other person. It's about you. See the conflict as a gift. It may feel like sandpaper, but it will free you. There's something in your root chakra that is blocked because of this conflict. When you let it go, you will have much freedom in your life. Freedom for the first time. And so that's the gift of forgiveness, not erasing what happened, but freeing ourselves from carrying it. And my dad talked about how he had shadows and secrets that he didn't deal with in this earth, and how he's having to take care of it on the other side. And the thing that gets me is it's not any easier on the other side. And it's true, because they have to come through us to deal with it. Someone who can talk through them. Story number 2. My mom speaks to a student. I have a student who's in Germany. And again, we have another sitter who didn't show up. So I became the sitter for my student. And for those of you who don't know what a sitter is, it's just someone who helps a student practice. And they just sit there and say yes, no, or maybe. The student taps in and she goes, I'm seeing symbols. I see a frail old lady. I see a yellow sun, a green apple, a black-eyed Susan flower, a porcelain teacup. She goes, and then I see mom, M-O-M in huge letters. Mom. And when I have my students practice, I have them practice with a certain picture. And she goes, and I see that, the thing that's in the picture. And I'm like, okay. And she goes, your mom's here. I'm like, okay. And she's like, she's very bright. I'm like, yes. Now, I'm just going to pause here for a second and let you know something that my father told me when he came through the first time in a reading after he passed away. He said, I never knew your mom was so high up. So remember that. I never knew your mom was so high up. So my student is like, she's hiding behind a door, but all I can see is bright white light. I said, well, ask her to come through. She said her energy is very overwhelming. And I knew why. She didn't. She's like, okay. And that's when my mom's energy came flooding in. And my student says, she's wrapping me in a cloak of love. I feel dizzy, completely enveloped in bright white light. It's overwhelming love. And I told my student, that's what it feels when you're connected with elevated beings. My mom has attained angel status. And then my mom gave her this message. You can connect with angels and archangels, and don't doubt that. And my student just looks at me in shock. And she said, when I opened up in meditation today, I saw a seatbelt. And as soon as she said that, I heard, "Buckle up, Buttercup." And then she said, and then I heard, "Buckle up." So I told her, don't doubt that. This is going to be quite a ride. And then she said something to me that will stick with me. And she said, "But I just wanted to be a medium." And I told her, you are a medium, but at a higher level. Not many people are given a gift to talk to angels. That's life-changing work. So my dad came through to teach about forgiveness and the hard work of it and the urgency of it and the freedom it brings. And then my mom comes through to demonstrate the reward of forgiveness, the pure love, the light, and the angelic presence that lifts others even higher. My mother had an extremely hard life on this earth. And I'm going to tell you a story about one day my mother was in a diabetic coma, and she came out of it and was in a regular hospital room. I came to that hospital room. I saw something in my mom I had never seen before. My mom had been diagnosed with bipolar. My mom had depression all of her life. I had never, ever seen my mom manic before, except for that one day. I came in. She was very happy. I was like, "Mom, what's going on?" She said, "I spent the night with Jesus." I was like, "Really?" She said, "Yes, he was on the TV all night." I was like, "Okay." I thought, something really was going on. I said, "Well, what happened?" She said, "He took me to heaven." "And what did you see?" She said, "My mom and dad were there." I was like, "Oh, goodness." And she said, "And I forgave them." And at that point, I knew my mom wasn't making it up, because there was no way on this earth that my mother would ever have forgiven her father for the things that he had done in her life. And I know that that day, that night, that my mother spent in heaven was the day that she talked to Jesus, and I was given this gift, that they discussed what I would be doing on this earth after she passed away, because things changed then. And after my mom passed, I had a reading where my mom talked about how she had talked to God, and they had given me gifts, and they had planted seeds, and they just had not grown yet. And this was many years ago. And I can look back today and see exactly what she was talking about. Back then, I didn't know what she was talking about. But if you told me many years ago, 7, 8, 9 years ago, that I'd be doing a podcast talking about my mom being an angel, or my dad in heaven talking about forgiveness, I definitely would call you crazy. But that's what this gift is. It is about helping others, because they have gone before us and they see what we can't. And my dad is my day-to-day guide. He helps me with this practical work that they do. And my mom is the angelic presence, and she opens doors for the students to step into gifts beyond what they even imagine. So I'm going to close here and just let you know that forgiveness doesn't excuse what happened, and it doesn't mean it was okay, but forgiveness sets us free. Free to heal, and free to elevate, and free to let Spirit use us to bring love and change into this world. And my dad's words remind us to do the work now, and my mom's presence reminds us what that work leads us to. And I want to leave you with this. Who in your life do you need to forgive? Not for them, but for you. Because it's just one simple fact. Forgiveness frees you. Thank you for listening to episode 3 of the 11 Intuitions podcast. If you would like to work with us or want more information, please follow us at www.11